just saw my face, but I have even greater and more exciting news. And we are so excited to have Imije Ninaz with us. They are connected and they are excited to share with us. I'm just going to share with all of you very briefly a little bit about the Office of Human Rights and Equity. The Howard County Office of Human Rights and Equity is an entity of Howard County government that seeks to eradicate discrimination, increase equal opportunity, and protect and promote human rights here in Howard County, Maryland. And we do that through 3 units. We have the investigative unit, the outreach unit, and the equity and restorative practices unit. The investigative unit does just what it sounds like. They investigate our cases of discrimination, but they also put forth legislation and policy to both the county council and the county executive that is of benefit to protecting and promoting human rights here in the county. The outreach unit is the unit that I lead, and I am so excited to lead that unit because we consider ourselves to be responsible for increasing the presence of the office throughout the community. And we do that through programs just like this, the virtual programs, in-person programs, trainings, presentations, listening sessions, and a myriad of other activities that many of you have had the opportunity to participate in, and we have loved getting to know all of you. And then finally, we have our Equity and Restorative Practices unit. They are responsible for ensuring that the deliverables for each department and office here in Howard County government is actually serving the community in equitable ways. And so they have done an equity audit, they have done focus groups, they have put together an equity framework, and are continuing to do a variety of structural work to ensure that Howard County government has an equity mindset. And we are so excited to continue to do this work together because our aim, as I said before, is to protect and promote human rights here in Howard County, Maryland. And we are excited to partner even across the country. And we have a phenomenal partner this afternoon in Imije Ninaz. And Imije Ninaz is a Black multimedia artist, integrative community care specialist, micro farmer, storyteller, poet, ordained minister, community advocate, and organizer, currently stewarding the traditional homelands of the Osage, Otoe, Kickapoo, Kaw, Shawnee, and Wyandot in western Missouri and eastern Kansas. X is the founder and director of the Nafasi Trans Care Collective for queer, trans, indigenous people of color, 5th District Representative for Kansas City's LGBTQ Equity Commission, and embodies several roles within local Black queer-led organizations, combining a wealth of holistic, earth-based knowledge, practices, and experiences. Imije strives to help build relationship systems that uplift disempowered people to thrive outside of all forms of colonialism and patriarchy. And we are so excited that they are going to share more in depth with us about what all of that means and how we can partner with a variety of individuals to perpetuate that kind of liberation. After Imije's presentation, they will engage in a conversation with Marla Moore, our outreach coordinator here in the Office of Human Rights and Equity. She is passionate about the intersectionality of arts and social justice. She is a former educator. She is a filmmaker. And she sits at a variety of intersections herself that I'm sure she is going to be extremely excited to share with this audience about. And so without further ado, I would like to bring on Imije Ninaz, who will speak to us this afternoon about resilience-based resistance. Imije, how are you?
Hey y'all, I'm doing good. I'm here in, like I said, Western Missouri. It is a cold but sunny day, so that's nice and it's helpful. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Listen, I am originally from Michigan, so I know the area of the country you're
No,
in very well. But I will go ahead. I'm going to step back and I'm going to let you educate us all. Thanks so much again.
word. Thank you. So before we jump into this, I just want to give a general space acknowledgement. And when I say space, I mean the physical places that we occupy, but also the spaces that our minds and our spirits and imaginations they create for us. These spaces are always, always, always going to be first laid for the foundation by Black and Indigenous people that have come before us. So we always want to acknowledge them first and foremost in the work that we do. Without them, our dreams cannot come to fruition because we are those dreams. I also do want to acknowledge time and space for the digital frontier, for those of us in communities, Black and Indigenous communities who do not have access to these new technologies. Not that technology is not accessible to us because we've always had technologies, but certain technologies are less accessible to us than others. And I just want to acknowledge the privilege and the honor that we have to be able to connect via this space and all the other spaces that we will connect in the future. So let's roll into resilience based resistance. Um, I am a very relaxed, conversational type of person. And so I'm not very hard up on getting all the nails, all the screws in, especially when we are having such a meaty conversation like this. Black queerness, Black transness, Blackness in itself are such in depth, like just ideals that we could spend all day talking about. So huge details, tiny, tiny details, they'll all be sort of meshed into this delicious sandwich that we're going to be weaving up together. So, for our conversation on Black trans, queerness, survival, health, joy, healing, we want to ask about what does that mean? What does the Black queer experience mean, especially when we are usually seen as the opposite of what normal is, especially when we are Black, because Blackness has uh, for a long time been sort of separated from the world of queerness, whereas the world has been informed by Black queerness in itself. So what do we mean when we talk about the Black queer experience? And just reading from the screen here for folks who like me sometimes need to see what we're hearing. What happens to the Black queer experience when Blackness is increasingly seen as the opposite of queer? When Black bodies are erased from educational and historical discourse, activism, and neighborhoods, while queer bodies are welcomed as a sign of progress and safety. What safety to a Black queer person is there in a white society? And for a lot of folks, that could mean a lot of things. Queerness is not necessarily sexuality, it's not necessarily romantic attraction. It is your existence. What queers you? What puts you on the, I guess you could say, the antithesis of what is deemed natural? Are you um, are you a femme-bodied person that is the primary provider for your home? That is queer. Are you a masculine person who is usually the one that takes care of the children or takes care of the family? That is queering your family. And so when we talk about Black liberation and Black queer equality, we have this intersection that we usually have to kind of navigate of race and sexuality, uh, classism, of religion, education, all of these different things that sort of form to create our experience, but they are shaded in a way that creates a Black queer experience outside of both Blackness and outside of both queerness. So these people have shaped pretty much every aspect of American life as Black people and as queer people. The answer to that, next slide, please. the answer to that is to exist. And when we say queering, just like I said on the other slide, when we say queering, we mean just to exist outside of what is deemed natural or normal. The term queer is a lens through which we can reclaim and imagine our bodies, lands, communities, and movements with the knowledge that diversity ensures resilience. That's pretty top to bottom. And I mean, that goes for the land that we stand on, that goes for the bodies that we live in. You cannot have a whole functioning system, a whole functioning institution without diverse moving parts. And that is exactly what queerness is. But when we look at queer as like a verb, um, what does that mean? It means that we just live. We just do what we have to do in the ways that make it easiest for us to do. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And this one is really, really small for me because I'm on my phone. So yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So one I guess you could say, I'm going to say it's my most important approach to survival is resilience-based organizing, or RBR, which is resilience-based resistance, the same thing that we're talking about here. And it's basically just a collective of people or ideas, whoever, just a collective of beings using whatever tools that they have available to themselves for the greater good of the entire community. So what that means is using our power together to meet the needs of everyone in the community. That means contesting the places of power or imbalances of power in our community that affect us to live wholly and wellly. So be that politics, be that religion, be that intercommunity violence, we collectively band together to use our tools and our knowledge to meet our community's needs. And that way, we assure that we can self govern ourselves because that's what sovereignty is. That means that we can protect ourselves and our futures. That means that we can protect our memories and protect our histories from being erased. Next slide, please. And I can go back, like if y'all want to ask questions in our thing later, I can go back and we can really break down some of these things. So a very, I guess you could say, simple definition of resilience-based organizing or resilience-based resisting is a strategy or system of care designed to meet community needs and mitigate interlocking violences via shared labor, personal communal power building, and empowering transformative narratives. So that's exactly what I mean when I say when we create space, those that we physically like occupy and those that we emotionally and mentally occupy, those that we create. Those are our transformative narratives. We know the saying of live the future that you want to be or fake it until you make it. That's something that we always say in the Black community, fake it till you make it, baby. That's exactly what a transformative narrative is. That's exactly what manifesting is. These are all transformative narratives that allow us to be resilient in the time that we live in. Each one of us has some power that can be used somewhere, somehow to save our earth. And that was a beautiful gem dropped on us by our trans sister, queer sister, Audre Lorde, who just celebrated a heavenly birthday on the 18th. And this was actually from one of her essays on generations and survival. And this was in a letter that was written December 17th in 1989. So this is not something new. This is resilience-based organizing, resilience-based resistance. This has been something that has been on our hearts, in our tongues, in our hands since our inception into this land. And it has just been, for a lack of better word, regurgitated in so many different ways, just to continue to make it relevant and palatable for the time and for whatever reason, well, I'm not going to say whatever reason, I'm going to say for the blessed, sacred reason that Audre Lorde's words are always relevant to us. Next slide, please. So, in a turn away from intersectionality, we have the crossings of Blackness and queerness that are being overlooked. So, there's a focus of overlapping oppressive power structures, that are kind of shaped by gender, class, race, sexuality, all of these things compounding on us all at the same time. And these are all things that inform Blackness, these are all things that inform queerness. The increasing focus on safety and visibility in queer activism has led to the construction of a white queer identity and community that has positioned itself against people of color who are seen as the most common perpetrators of violence against queers and not the victims of violence. The shift in focus from fighting police brutality to mainstream queer politics centering on whiteness is also reflected in the collective memory of mainstream queer communities. That is a mouthful, but to sort of water it down to give you something to drink after that is exactly what we always say in communities like ours. Nothing really matters to America as a whole until it starts to affect white people. And when we think about Blackness, we think about queerness, we think about transness and how that resistance is shaped in a white society. It is very much shaped by the white people around us. And so our resistance as Black queer people has to not only be resistance against the erasure of our own community, but also erasure of our own community within a community, if that makes sense. So we are fighting multi fights, multi faces of erasure and silencing, while also just just trying to live, being victims of violence while also being pointed the finger at and saying you are the one that is doing the harm to us. So there's a huge complex in relating as Black and queer, as queer and American, as Black and American. All of these different intersections sort of overlap and oppress people on different levels. But when we think about our queer resilience inside of all of that, we actually see how our existence really shines out of that, and it actually illuminates the way that everyone else around us gets to navigate the world. Next slide, please. And speaking of collective memory, collective white memory, we always think about pride, right? June is Pride Month. We know that, and we are ready for it every single time. But one huge thing we always talk about, well, where did it start? Where's the history? One huge thing that we think about, at least a lot of folks in my Black queer, Black trans circles, that we think about is the initial erasure of our efforts. The first Pride was a riot. It was Stonewall riot. And while a lot of our counterparts are queer, lesbian, gay, queer, trans, all of these counterparts, they sort of whitewash it into, well, this was the first time that white and brown and Black folks all got together to be queer and be angry at the cops. And that is exactly not what happened. That is exactly not what happened. What it really was Black and brown, queer and trans people contesting and protesting for their lives, to stop being criminalized, to stop being victimized, to stop having to navigate so many different systems of interlocking violence, that once that energy got so big, other people that was around could not help but to be swept into that. The first brick was thrown by a Black trans man. The second brick was thrown by a brown trans woman. The third brick thrown by a Black trans woman. So these are steps that have been erased and commodified, like so many other aspects of Blackness, that we as Black queer and Black trans folks don't necessarily get to talk about, because there's that separation of one world being Black, one world being queer, and not really being able to really being able to merge both of them in a way that is transformative for everyone. I have I guess you could say, a driving quote from a friend of mine that says, when multi-marginalized people are in danger, we are all in danger. And that is exactly what happened the night of Stonewall. That is exactly what happened when we started to create and craft this story of what happened on the night of Stonewall. So this is sort of a glaring example of what Black trans, Black queer resistance sort of gets when it shines the way that it does. And another thing that we need to resist against by telling our own stories. And so when we talk about needing to tell our own stories, we also have to talk about the sanitization of our movement. There's been over 40 years. Let's see, Stonewall was in the 60s, almost 70s. So there's been over 40 years of movement building, of media, of interviews, of all of these different visualizations coming into light for LGBTQ folks that don't include BIPOC folks, that don't include the Black and brown, queer, and trans folks that actually started these movements. So, what do we do outside of that? What have Black and queer, trans folks been doing while all of this has been going on? We have been living resilience based resistance. We cannot stop to say, hey, we did this, because we are too busy caring for our loved ones who are, navigating HIV and AIDS. We are busy caring for our loved ones who are housing insecure or have unsafe families. We are busy actually being resilient. We are busy actually resisting. And so there's been a lot of space for this sanitization to happen. And now that we call it out, here we are, and being like, well, what do we do? How do we, I guess you could say, how do we remark the waters? How do we recolor the waters, paint the picture properly? Next slide, please. So about painting the picture properly, we need to ask about what should be in the picture, right? We should ask what has been erased, and what elements we should be reincorporating back into our transformative future, back into our imaginative, what we're calling into reality. And the reality is, Black and brown folks, especially femme-bodied folks who are coded as female, we are absolutely the last ones in line when it comes to the exposure, when it comes to representation, when it comes to actually recognizing and giving people their flowers. We talk about giving people their flowers a lot. Black and brown femmes are usually at the bottom of the totem pole. So those are the first ones that we need to add back into our vision, right? And we do that by going out and finding out where they are. We go out and we do exactly what we're doing here. Howard County has reached out to someone who would normally be erased in history to say, hey, we want to uplift your voice. Hey, we want to go back and do what Angela Davis tells us to do, that for every distance that we go forward, we make sure that we go back and we lift and we bring someone with us, right? That's exactly how we continue to paint that picture. That's how we rectify this sanitization. That's how we, I guess you could say, reintroduce the right cultures into our environment. Next slide, please. And this is just something that I always like to say to people, that transition is inevitable. Like, it doesn't matter if it's going to be 10 years from now, 10 days from now, things are going to change. Whether they're going to change for the better or the worse, it's not really up to us. But justice, freedom, and healing are not inevitable. These are things that we must fight for. These are things that we must prepare for. These are things that we must defend, because until we are all free, we're all going to be struggling. Just exactly what I said. When multi-marginalized people are struggling, we are all struggling. When multi-marginalized people are in danger, we are all in danger. But when multi-marginalized people are empowered, everyone is empowered. When multi-marginalized people can move freely, when we are liberated, everyone is moving freely. Everyone is liberated. You know what I mean? Next slide, please. And so this is also really small, but I am definitely going to read this for y'all because this is I spent some time thinking about the hardiest definition of queer resilience, of trans resistance that I could think of. And this is where we are. This is the mandate here. And then I will actually bring my phone a little closer so y'all can see this. So queer and trans resistance is and has been rooted in Black trans liberation practices and disability justice from day one. Despite the attempts to whitewash this history, queer resistance queer resistance means looking to our collective past, centering the voices that have consistently been pushed to the margins during our revolutions in consciousness and as people turn towards abolition. By centering the voices of Black and Indigenous folks in our movements, we truly embody the spirits of resilience, resistance, and liberation. Queer and trans resistance looks like culturally sustaining, life enhancing, structurally transformative practices in every aspect of life. Queer resistance is the practice of both refusal and acceptance. QTPOC resilience based on organizing is an affirmation of liberation, sovereignty, sanctuary, and sustainability. It is a refusal of racism, colonialism, economic and environmental injustice. Queer resistance is a refusal to be singularly defined. It's a welcome acceptance from the ground up, from the land, the water, and all of our relations, all organizing and working together for a more inclusive, equitable, and just future. And y'all can marinate on that for a minute because that's what this is about. It's about it's about our world having space to sustain all forms of life, regardless of its origin, regardless of its size, its form, its shape, its place, its kinship, its care. There is room to sustain all life on earth. There is room. And that life is not just to be here. It's not just to exist, but it's to thrive. It's to be its whole well self, whatever that means. That's what queer resistance is. That's what trans resistance is. That's what resilience is to exist in your whole self, to occupy space to the point where you can produce space. Yeah. Next slide, please. For queer people, resilience has often been conceptualized as a buffer of protection against hardships when navigating oppressive social systems such as heterosexualism, homophobia, and transphobia. Through, excuse me, queer resistance based in abolition thought is a way forward that could make the world freer for all of us. This is work that all of us have shared responsibility to engage in. And when I say we all have a responsibility to engage in this work, it means to do what you can, when you can, where you can. Do your work to unpack whatever it is that you have to unpack. If that means your own internalized cis heterosexism, if that means your own biomaterialism, we encounter a lot of things where people think what makes you you is what you can carry on your body. Not necessarily the clothes you put on, but what you can carry on your body, how you carry your hips, how you carry your lips. These are things that sort of cloak our identities, but our responsibility is to uncloak all of that. Is to find out who we are at the base and how we relate to other people, because that's what queer folks have always been tasked to do. That's been our work since our, I guess you could say, our actualization of ourselves, is to relate to others. Next slide, please. So, how do we envision a transformative narrative? Because liberation will require divestment from institutions and behaviors that limit us. And that is exactly what I mean when I say you have to do your work. You have to, I guess you could say, look at yourself through an unbiased lens. And if you can't do that, you need to start getting in communications in circles with folks who are going to tell you about yourself, because that's what it's going to take. That's where we are right now. You have to approach this work with a sense of honesty, because we all know that what they say, the truth will set you free. And we can't liberate ourselves, we can't divest from things if we're kidding ourselves, you know what I mean? Next slide, please. People cannot go where they have not been yet in their minds. Our actions must paint for people an irresistible vision of the future, one based not on our fear of the worst, but rather our boldest visions of a future worth fighting for. When you uncloak yourself and you find out who you are, you find out who you want to relate to. What does that mean for your future? How do you craft, um, how do you sell this future without money? How do you sell this future to other people to make them want to believe, so that you're not living in this future alone? We need to do the work of envisioning. What does a decolonized future look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? How are communities responding to need? How does gender, sexuality shape our relationships to land, to place, and each other? And how will we weave our work towards justice and inclusion together in irresistible ways? We are in the midst of a fight for our lives. And it's not just Black queer folks. It's not just Black folks. It's not just queer folks. We as humanity are in the middle of the fight for our lives. The very land that we live on is telling us that she's not sustaining us, that she's not dealing with what we're bringing. And we have a choice to make. So, how do we change our relationship? How do we shape our relationship to land, place, and each other? Because the way we treat each other is usually the way we treat the earth. The way we treat the earth is usually the way we treat each other. So, how do we transform these ways to work in a more irresistible, delicious future that's going to feed us all, that we're all going to be well fed? Next slide, please. For me, that answer has been to create the Nafasi Trans Care Collective. So, what we do is we focus on Black resilience, Black resistance, and liberation. We focus on whole person wellness, communal wellness, and we focus on the future. We focus on calling in the future. So we are a Black trans-led coalition that uses earth-based ancestral practices. Um, we actually derived our name from Nafasi, which is a Swahili word that means space. And I talked about space earlier, how we produce it, how we occupy it, how we create it, all these things. Space is such an important, I guess you could say, idea, a concept to grasp for Black, queer, and trans folks, because our space is who we are. We can't exist without that space, and our existence is literally producing that space. So it's sort of a never-ending cycle, and that was one of my reasons for creating Nafasi. Next slide. Nafasi is also an extension of my personal lineage as a Black Indigenous person. I steward a lot of traditional homelands of my cousins that are not my own homelands. My ancestral homelands are actually to the southeast of here, and it's a huge honor for me to occupy space here and to be given blessing to protect this space for other Black and Indigenous folks. So we reclaim space through, I guess you could say, mitigating some of those interlocking violences of neighborhood blight and environmental racism. We also reclaim space through the interlocking violence of, excuse me, of genocide and a lot of the different, and when I say genocide, I don't mean like people coming through Kansas City, like killing people or anything like that. No, genocide as in like the emotional, mental, and natural genocide of the space around us. We mitigate right through that because it's a it's a key part in our existence here. If there's not space for us to exist, if there's not land for us to exist on, we can't do anything, right? So, in our outreach, we do a lot of empowering and advocacy of, I guess you could say, encouraging other people to take stock of their land, take stock of their space, and to envision something that would be much more transformative and beneficial for them in the future. Last slide, please. And so that has been my short presentation. I'm Imije Ninaz. My pronouns are XX, like complexes. I'm a Black Cree person. I only use those pronouns. I am in the middle of the Midwest doing all of those wonderful things that you heard about earlier. And yeah, I'm very happy and very excited to share all of these things with you all. So thanks.
Wow, that was fire. Okay. Thank you very much. Um, the thing is, you might be, half a country away from us, but you do realize that we brought you here. And we did battle some technology. So, the one thing I would like to say is thank you all who are watching, whether it's now, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's couple, 10 minutes from now, whatever it is. We know that you are coming with the spirit where you'll be patient, where you will be loving and realizing that if you live in a world where your technology works like that, or you live in a world where you don't have to take a bus or 5 buses to do something, that is a privilege. But
That is a privilege.
if you refuse to cogerm with people who do not have the same economics, the same class, the same abilities that you have, where does that end? So I want to really put that out there and boldly say, yeah, we were a little late. Yes, we're in a government office, but you know what? It is more important to be patient and make space for people sometimes than it is to be like, okay, because as we say as Black people, the devil is busy. So
Always.
I want to again thank you for that. And then I want to just dovetail off of this Black History Month's theme is Black resistance. You cited exactly what that is, right? So you know what I'm going to have to ask you is how can people who don't feel connected to whatever the movement is, you could be like, well, I'm Black, but I'm not LGBTQIA plus plus. You could be like, but I'm not disabled. How can I lean in and work with those people? So I'd like to hear that from you. What can people who want to celebrate resilience, because I'll tell you this, in our county is probably the same as in your town. You want everyone to come to something, regardless of age, right? Regardless of color, culture, or class.
Mhm.
But when you have an event that says Asian or Black or LGBTQIA, you get it, right? You already know where I'm going.
Yep.
How do we let people know that if you show up, because the few white people, for instance, who showed up at the Black History Month celebration we went to and enjoyed it and learned about our culture and asked questions, that's life changing and affirming to both parties.
Yeah.
So, what can people do to educate themselves? And also, you can also talk about that emotional labor that they've always seemed to have you paying.
I would first and foremost, like I said earlier, a lot of engaging in this work is to do your work, and that is to be honest with yourself. A lot of times when we encounter folks that say, I'm Black, but I'm not, I'm I'm disabled, but I'm not, XYZ, they are operating in emotion. And we say is allies always lie. So what we're asking for is to make a shift to accomplish shit, right? Because when you're an accomplice into something, that means you down to do something dirty if
You
you
got
got
skin
to.
in the game, right? I want you
You
to
got
get some
some
skin in
skin in
my
the
game,
game.
right? Exactly.
Exactly. So we want people to make that shift to accomplish it, to let us know that we're willing to actually put something on the line. I'm not in the same intersections as you, so I don't, the gamble ain't the same weight, but I'm willing to sacrifice something with you. I'm willing to give something more. Something that I always uh kind of re-ring in my head is something from a very good friend of mine, Don, who says, bring your time, your talent, and your treasure. That is the way that you make the shift to accomplish it. Even if you know you just have that heart connection there, take your time to unpack yourself, to learn what you need to do, to learn what you need to know about this community, right? Bring your talents to make yourself available in whatever capacity it is. And in your talent, that's where you'll find your treasure. That's where you'll be able to say, well, I'm an accountant and I can help your organization get your books together. Well, I manage the theater over here on Main Street. I can offer you all a space to meet if y'all need to. Bring your time, your talent, and your treasure and offer it. And when you offer it, make sure that they know that it is simply that, an offering. It's not something that is mandatory, because we also cannot skip over the fact that all allies, all accomplices are not aligned, because that's another thing. Alignment is important in this work. Yes, you may be Black and queer, but if you are not a Black queer abolitionist, we not aligned. Yes, you may be Black and disabled, but if you are not a Black disabled abolitionist, we are not aligned. There are fundamental things there that hiccup. It's not always a problem in every space, but in the right space, it could be the problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just figuring out who you are, what your capacity is, how you can operate in that capacity, and then offering that in earnestness is what you can do to get involved.
Yes. And I also want to circle back to the transformative narrative, because when you said the fake it till you make it, or I feel like that is part of Black resistance and Black joy that I grew
Absolutely.
up on and that my grandmother grew up on. And I'm going to tell you, and my mother, I'll tell you this, like, I know you do vision board work as well, right? But my elders did vision boards and they would be like, just put a picture on the refrigerator, put the picture
Yep.
near you can be that. You can do that. So how important, I mean, you said how important was sorry, but how can people work on a new transformative narrative? Like, my recommendation I'll throw in out there is read The Gospel According to Shug from Temple of My Familiar by Alice Walker.
Hmm.
Because woo woo
Yeah.
woo, because that has two queer women making a survival list, and that survival list, what was it, the 80s, right? That
Yep.
survival list is still current now.
It's still
Show it to
relevant.
your partner, yes, your children, your partners, because you need to be able to protect yourself. Grow some food. So I would say when you start to think about Fannie Lou Hamer now, give you some air so you can talk about that.
Look, so that's exactly what you do. That's exactly what you do. You read, you go out and you connect. If you don't know, you, if you don't know, it's okay to just say, "Hey, I don't know," because that's the biggest thing. Like that's the biggest step is to just say, "Look, I'm not well versed in this, and so that means I have a lot of storage." You know, go
Yeah.
out, read your books, go out, talk to your elders. I absolutely believe in intergenerational relationships being the future. That is our transformative narrative. There is an old African proverb that says that the old know the way, but the young can get there faster. You know what I mean when I say that, right? Listen to what they got to say, but revolutionize it, modernize it into our own times. Because we also can't forget that our grandmas and aunties was also the same ones that was smoking Marlboros, holding the baby in the front seat with the little, you know what I'm saying? It was a lot of things going on back then that wasn't exactly what we got going on now. So those intergenerational relationships are absolutely important. Going back and reading those old things from the 80s, the 90s, and I'm gonna say they old now because I'm in my 30s now, so I can say that now. But going back to read those old vintage things and really taking stock of what that means for you today. Like you just said, growing food as a queer person back then, that's normal. Everybody had a garden back then, but this was a house of Black queer people. That's not normal for them. It wasn't normal for them to even have a house.
They
You
were
know what
women,
I'm
look,
saying?
living off the land, and they had their own cottage industry, and they came from abusive relationships and did their thing, and they shut
These
that
are
man
things
down.
these are
Okay?
things that are unheard of, right? This is
Right,
a
right.
transformative narrative. And what brought them together was simply existing in their time and space, that resilience of
And a
just
crazy
being
man,
alive
look, a foolish
in a
man.
crazy way.
And that will look, but that has united so many Black women and femmes, right? And across the board, and people who
Yeah.
have other identifications. One wrong person who has a little point, their compass is pointing toward the patriarch a little bit much, can sour everybody's game.
Hmm.
Okay, so give us some other ways to find joy, because you already know we've talked about the resistance, and I know that you existing and us existing in this time and space is joy. We are so joyful, and we'll be joyful that we can continue to do more things. But what can people do in the tangible day to day? Because I just look, people are depressed, especially after COVID. And whatever
Yeah.
problems they had before, you already know it magnified for people who
They're
didn't have.
magnified.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I live in a fairly resource insecure family, and finding joy is something that we take very seriously. Um, one of the little, I guess you could say, takeaways for me has been to produce space. So I said that a lot throughout this time together, to produce space. And what that means is to literally carve out time. If that means, if it's just 5 seconds of saying thank you, if it's 5 seconds of just screaming at the top of your lungs to get that pressure off of you, that's what you got to do. You got to find your joy, right? So I always recommend movement. I don't care what physical form you have. Move yourself, what in any capacity that you could do. I do a lot of hand voguing, chair voguing. I do a lot of that because um, it helps to move that energy. One thing that we have to remember is, as humans, we are made of precious metals and minerals and all of these different elements that outside of us are used as conduits for everything else, right? The copper that's in our blood is also the same copper that's helping to deliver our electricity, right? That's the same copper that's in our devices that's helping. Find ways to reconnect with those elements outside of yourself. Drink you some water, some mineral water. Go outside and wave your hands in the air. Just really find ways to experience your space and to expand that space, whatever that means for you in that moment. Sometimes I'll be in the house mad as I'll get out, and I'm ready to fight the air, and I'm punching, and next thing I know, I look like I'm doing wushu. I look like I'm saying hey ho. You know what I'm saying? You just have to move through it. Another way that I suggest finding joy is to connect with people. We are humans. We are meant to be a communal species. And unfortunately, capitalism, patriarchy, religious, all these other things that sort of encourage individualism are actually the things that are harming us the most, right? So there's a thing that's called a monoculture. Monocultures of the mind, right? How we all start to think the same because we're all going through the same thing. We all experienced this pandemic together, even though there were varying intensities of pandemic, varying intensities of trauma. We all sort of developed this monoculture of general sadness, of general, just low vibrations, right? But when we connect with each other and our conduits connect, our spaces connect, we start to generate energy, and we can direct that energy to how we want it to go. And that means being aligned with the people that you connect with, you know. It also means refusing and accepting as one. That's the breath of life, right? Everybody that you connect with, you may share energy with, but they may not be aligned. They may not be the right energy for you. They may not be the right joy inducing energy for you, but you made that connection and the energy has moved. We have to start really thinking about uh I guess you could say nuance in terms of what we mean in joy and existence and so and so and so and so. We always talk a lot of crap about the silver lining. Nobody wants to hear about the silver lining. But the silver lining is actually where the light reflects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where the conduits connect. The silver lining is what the lightning hits. You know what I mean? So we just have to make those connections. If we spark, we spark. If we don't, you move on. You take those ions somewhere else. We just have to keep moving.
That should be on a like a cup or a t-shirt or something. Like, if the connection doesn't work right, take those ions somewhere else, because it's not personal. Because that's the other thing, I think part of
Yeah, it's not,
joy, right, is
it's
realizing
lesson.
that everybody is going through something different. And so if someone doesn't connect with you, understand you, one thing that we have stopped as a I hope we're stopping as a universal, if there is a universal Pan African descendant culture, we need to stop explaining and overstating what we do. You know what I mean? And stop asking for excuses and forgiveness for things. Because I'll give you a perfect example. I'm not going to name the show and get on to it, but for instance, if you think about how white spirituality, for instance, or the patriarchy, it's portrayed in movies, they don't explain, or media, or whatever, films, music, TV, they don't explain everything they do. They just do something. But if a black person, in whatever place, like in an American,
Yeah,
European
yeah,
offering, they want to throw some calories. You got to be like, we're throwing these shells to tell our fortunes to the ancestors, or we're
yeah.
doing this cultural thing. And my point is, I think that we need to stop black splaining our culture, and just that will make you so happy. Like, are you wearing that? Yes, I am.
I sure am.
I sure am. Are you yes, I've made this choice. Yes,
Mhm,
I'm listening to
mhm,
this. I'm eating that. I'm watching this. I
mhm,
think hopefully COVID is realizing that if you're going to spend a lot of time with yourself, you don't really need to ask permission except from your inner self or a higher power.
mhm. I think, and this is a silver lining of COVID for me, is this almost forced time alone is forcing people to uncloak themselves.
Yes.
So people are less inhibited by their own things, you know. Just during this time of COVID, I've seen so many people. I started a new hobby that I've always wanted to start, and I've always been too shy to do it. I've started a new. I've done this. I've because well, I figured COVID was the right time,
I,
and in so many ways, just like I don't know if anybody else's grandparents has ever said this to them, but how they always talk about you never miss the water until it's gone,
yeah. Till
right?
the well runs dry, you don't
Till
miss
the
your water.
well runs dry.
Yeah.
Right. COVID took our water.
Yes.
COVID took our water. We were all out swimming willy nilly, doing whatever we wanted to do, and we weren't really doing what we wanted to do, right? And then COVID made us all come and sit down, and a lot of folks had to get their act together, you know. And I want to say for Black queer, Black trans folks, Black disabled folks in general, it was really a time of awakening. We depended on each other in ways that our family lineages have not seen since times of Jim Crow and before.
Right.
I've seen families that have lived apart for years suddenly have to move back in together
Yes.
during COVID,
Yes.
and how that's changed their family dynamic. It's changed the power dynamics in the family. And it's honestly, it's queered their lives. It's queered their lives. And that's what COVID is doing for a lot of folks, is queering lives. And it's kind of hard to grapple with because of the loss, the trauma, all the changes that are being made. But from a disabled point of view, baby, this has been my life already.
Right. Exactly.
Welcome to the party.
Right. If you've
You
always
know?
had issues with mobility, communication, connection, and then the other thing, I'll throw out there for people, as being a neurodivergent person, is sometimes just the oppression of the lights and the noise that people don't even hear that we hear, or just um, smells, certain things having to
Yeah,
go into a work environment. So I don't think it's just an accident that a lot of people who were in person doing a lot of things suddenly decided to work online or work
yeah,
for themselves, because I feel like you're like, how much more productive can we be without the voices in our head or the interruptions, right, that are coming from other people wanting and wanting. By the same token, that's the black, I'll say femme and I'll say masculine, the best I can is for them of what a mother is. And the mother could be any gender or no gender, by the way. It's the maternal thing, but the weight of the black person with the maternal responsibility.
the
We've
caregiver.
The caregiver. Yes, that's better. Thank you. The person who takes care of the kids, right? And those how in the house, those things. We've always had to work outside of our homes since slavery. We've never had a respite. So you get what I'm saying? It's kind of a
Yeah.
thing
I
where
mean, it was
part
illegal to be a housewife at one point. It was
yes,
illegal to be a Black
yes,
person without a job in several.
yes.
It's
Yeah.
actually illegal to be homeless in Missouri right now. These are the same arguments that we're having.
Right. All this time.
And
Nothing. That's the thing, is rights are being taken away around this country. One of the things I wanted to bring up was the SB Proposition SB 134, which is vulnerable child compassion and protection, similar to Florida, only worse. And I'll give that to you because, and the only reason I'm mentioning it, because we in Howard County don't live in a vacuum or a bubble. The thing is, injustice starts in one place and it grows and it grows and it grows when you're looking somewhere else and you're worried about your life. And you should, but pay
Mhm,
attention to what's going on.
mhm.
So tell us about it.
So the Missouri has just initially passed one of the harshest "Don't Say Gay" bills in the nation. Um, I mean, the magnitude of this. A lot of folks, we think about, oh, that means teachers and school nurses and gym teachers. Like, we think about those small little things. But for me, as someone who works with youth, this effectively outlaws every single GSA in the state. We have countless research that shows that one safe space in a queer or trans child's life can reduce their attempts at suicide, their attempts at taking their own life, self-harm. They can reduce these attempts by over 70% by having one safe space. And for Missouri to effectively take away that one safe space for a lot of students, it is essentially condemning them, you know, and it's scary. But even on top of that, it's also opened the door to other bills. So now we have the trans youth health care bill that's now also been expanded to adults, to incarcerated adults. Now, before I take this bite, we also have to acknowledge the history of incarceration of Black and brown bodies on this land and what
Yes.
that means, the continuation of enslavement, right? And so now we have a government that says these wards of ours, which is what they're calling them, these wards of ours, we have the right to choose whether or not they deserve health care. They deserve their health care, because whether or not anybody wants to say it, that's what trans affirming care is. It is health care, period. And now these adults are being denied this. These children being the least protected group in this country, are now being oppressed, and their parents can't do anything about it. Their parents are now also in danger for protecting their children.
And also
So,
LGBTQIA parents are in danger because you're
yeah.
talking about what they're basically saying to those who don't understand the bill is that any type of educational platform from K through high school, right? You are
Mhm,
not allowed to address LGBTQIA because they feel that if you even just mention it, like some people choose this, some people choose this, or some people live this,
mhm,
this is a lived, just a general thing like, could even affect how you dress, how you carry yourself, how you
yep,
identify in the classroom, which this is not about those people want to make you think it's about sexuality and romance, but we're not talking about that. What we're saying is that if I
mhm.
was
Control.
born in a certain body and I want to wear whatever I want to wear, right? And it could be a hair color because the same culture, the same country that births people who go around cutting off folks' dreadlocks or telling them that it's all oppression, right? And so it's
Mhm,
very easy to sit back and say, well, this doesn't affect me. It's protecting. So it's not because here's one thing. What if a counselor, a teacher, or someone is appearing in a different way than what you may expect? That's the best way to say it, right? That teacher could be, or that person could be, or that community member could be an inspiration, a teacher, anything in their own right. But you're making it really hard, if not impossible, for them to interact with the youth. And the youth, some
yeah,
of them need them. The ones who are not in these categories needed to learn compassion and
yeah,
understanding. And just because we have friends, who just has all one kind of friend anymore? Okay. But the point is, you're making a certain group of people illegal in the streets, in the
mhm.
school, in their homes,
In their homes.
in their homes,
Yeah,
right? So it's pretty, and this obviously is the opposite of joy, but battling these certain things, these difficult issues, and trying to see people as human and advocate, it gives you a satisfaction, a deep satisfaction of doing the work that I don't think we'll say is joyful, but it's triumphant, isn't it? It's kind of
it
a,
is.
it
It's
is,
valuable.
it's
It's valuable.
valuable.
Yeah.
It's valuable. So how do art this is a different because I know you're an artist and we saw your beautiful, amazing, spiritual, indigenous African mental landscape. It's so beautiful, like what's in your brain. So we saw this in the slideshow, but how does the art and the spirituality play into your lived experience and survival and that might help someone else?
For me, I was raised Black Baptist, Black Southern Baptist, and that's also in the middle of a very white rural area. And so that in itself is sort of a I guess you could say a kaleidoscope of experiences, the things that I've seen. Um, a lot of the a lot of the religious houses and things are out here are very, I guess you could say, integrated in the right spaces. So let there be a regional thing. You will absolutely see white churches, black churches, brown churches, Korean churches, all these different people coming together and, celebrating their faith, celebrating their religion. And the artwork that was there has always been something that has sort of spoken to me. I am I'm very much a colors type of person. And for me, the colors that I see in religious settings, be it a mosque, be it a Catholic church, be it a Baptist church, hey, be it a hoodoo hut in the woods, the artwork that is there is symbolic of the emotion that is being housed in this space. The artwork that is there is symbolic of the history of this space. And so for me, it became ingrained pretty early on to not necessarily record things with words or with smaller symbols, but to record things with the way that they sort of come into my mind. And so for me, that turned out to be the way that I make my transformative narratives. If I
Yes.
see if I see a field of purple flowers that just so happen to be non-native flowers, and I know that there are flowers that could be there, or that there are flowers that should be there, um, that's where I start envisioning things. I will create a painting that has Sweet William there
Oh, nice.
because that's what's supposed to be there, you know? And when I apply that to sort of an activism lens, we always say that art imitates life and that we fake it until we make it, right? So this has sort of been a circle for me, right? I've learned to internalize things, internalize the emotions, and arrange them in a way that looks good to me. And then I go ahead and I take that and I share it with others. And I hope that in turn, they see it and internalize it and they change it in their mind to share it with others again, you know? And so it's just sort of been my way to contribute my time, talent, and treasure into activism, into existence, into resisting, just being alive, because everything that I do is creative. I create my own space. So everything that I do within that space is creative.
Absolutely, and amazing and thought-provoking. So I will make sure that if your socials and your website are not in the chat, we'll put them next to the video, right? So
Okay.
that people can where it's posted. Um, is there anything else as we're kind of drawing to a close? Although we could talk forever
We
because
could talk forever.
there's a lot to unpack. Are there any things, I mean, I guess the last that you would want to say, I know the last thing I like to say is part of the reason we're here too is because we are not entertainment for you. And we're not just palatable when we are funny, happy, helping you, assisting you. We do not have magical powers. And even if I am a magical Black person, that trope, my community needs my magic, people.
Facts.
Facts. So it's like, are you comfortable, whoever you are? Because this doesn't just translate to Caucasian people, this translates to everyone. The people who are in different protected classes from you, gender identities, races, cultures, the whole nine, they're not there for your entertainment. We are not mascots. We are not here to help you solve your problems. What is it,
Mhm.
sidekick? Did I cover all of that? We're not the sidekick, because having to do that work for you and be that person for you denies us of our agency, our humanity, and most certainly our joy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That that wrapped it up right there. Cause yeah, we're not here for that. Right now, this is like I said earlier, we're all in the fight for our lives. Capitalism is threatening to take us all out. And so right now we are in the mode of divide and conquer, switching to uplift and unite, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Define and unite. Define and unite. That's where we're at.
Yes.
Um,
And we
I would
welcome
say,
accomplices, right? We want
right,
accomplices. That's
we want
it. So,
accomplices. Allies always lie. We want accomplices. I want you to get your hands dirty with me. I want you to put some skin in the game. The cops coming after this, but we ready because we have to do what we have to do.
right,
You
and
know.
you can and there's a whole bunch of, like, I wanna mention the sister, the doctor who coined the term intersectionality, right? And
Yes, Miss
mention
Kimberly
Kimberly
Crenshaw.
Crenshaw. Yes, the professor, law professor and theorist, and this has been around the concept of intersectionality, that the more of the things that you have, it's gonna make your life harder and you're gonna fit into
Harder.
more different crossroads. And this was coined in 1989. So the notion of all these things, just like it's now a thing, intersectionality, just like Me Too, that was corrupted by that was a black
Hmm.
woman, but then Hollywood
Hmm.
tried to yank it from us and we have to bring it back. Our movements matter. So another way people can support is get receipts. Get receipts.
Get receipts.
Get
Yeah. If you see
receipts.
something, if you see it, if you hear it, you need to record it.
Right. And if you see something being miscredited, sometimes it's a question of ask the question, because you know what?
Yeah.
It isn't like there's always going to be that person in the room, but we know that encounters like this will have me more conscious. You can best believe that I work here. I'm an outreach coordinator, but I stumble and fumble. And you saw me trying to find language, but you saw my co-conspirator giving me the language that I needed to communicate. So do not be afraid. Ask the
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah.
build the collaboration, and be humble about it. I think that's also too from the outside.
Yes. From yeah. I think one of the so my organizational director, Justice, always has this thing of being humble and being graceful about being wrong.
Yes.
Space, grace, and time to self-correct.
Yes. Yes.
If you are wrong, be wrong and accept whatever that wrongness means for you. Take that L, get yourself together, and come back. Because if you let one mistake take you out, you're not useful to us. The people that have got boots on the ground every day, we make mistakes every day
Yes.
with ourselves, with our community, with our teams. We make mistakes every day. But a part of resilience based resistance is to come back,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know? So that's one thing. And even piggybacking off of that, for folks who do want to get involved and don't know where to, for folks who have, I guess, started to dip their toes in, but backed up for whatever way, whatever reason, number one thing I can tell you is to follow the leadership of Black and Brown mages. And I'm going to introduce this term to y'all again. I use this term a lot. Mages is Mages. It sounds like a magical term. It is magical because we are magical, but it stands for marginalized genders. And so this encompasses anyone who is not a white, cisgender, heterosexual male. Okay. Um, Follow the Black and Brown leadership of mages because we have been the ones who have been at the bottom of the totem pole, working our way up. We have been the ones who have collectively been like shouldering the burden of all of these different movements. Every single liberatory movement you could think of on this land has been shouldered by Black and Brown mages. And so now the time has come for y'all to shift that and to listen to us, to take the burden off of our shoulders and give us the reins instead.
And believe the lived experience
Yeah.
of those who are coming at you with it, because I know you've experienced it, I've experienced it, where people need to get corrected, they need information, or you're just talking like, well, that's not my experience, so it's not real. And it's a body language, it's a look, it's
Yeah,
like a, you can
yeah.
know when you're being shut down. So part of hearing the stories, whether you're reading, researching, listening, and just being in community, maybe you don't say anything the first time you go to a meeting, or you just introduce yourself, but you're like, I'm here to listen and learn. Okay, we don't mind a little bit of ear hustling, but eventually if you don't say anything, you're gonna look suspicious.
You
But
stuff.
seriously, right, you're gonna be sus if you don't talk at all. But if you come and introduce yourself in your organizations or whatever it is, and you're like, hi, I really want to know how best to support you. That's the other thing. Probably the biggest thing that I've learned in my life is outreach is, you might have this brilliant idea in your heart
Mm-hmm.
and your soul, and you love it and it's great, but you need to do one thing first. Find, well, there's two things, but it's a two-parter thing. Find out what somebody else is already doing from that community, preferably. Okay, so if I go, Imije, I'd like to do this. So if I ask X and X says, well, you should just let me do it because I'm the person. I'm like, you absolutely
You're right.
are the person. I don't have to be like, can I get, can I have your bio? Can I have your resume? Can I look at your lived experience and your work? Because this is the other thing. People who are going to be coming to this table have something you'll never have. Building coalition, the lived experience of the culture by which you are trying and
Mm-hmm.
professing to serve people. They, and it doesn't matter, like I said, it switches around. The one thing about these lessons is that it's not just applicable toward us, it is applicable toward you making partnership, period. Find out people in that town need. If you're partnering with a mosque, a
Yeah,
synagogue, a church, find out what those people are already doing. And you come in and say, hey, on a humble tip, I have some computer access for you, or I'd like to give you rides, or can I take you to the store? Can I bring you meals? What are some
yeah,
things that you need? And what are some populations that you wish you could serve? And what do they need? And you can't. Because I've made that mistake of assuming I had the great idea and bring it. And the people are like, we love you, but this is the wrong time of year because the community won't be able to support that because they're doing back to school efforts for their children.
yeah.
I wasn't mad. I was like, well, let's do it whenever. But finding out keeps us all with egg on our face. The other thing would probably be don't
Hmm.
stop trying. Like we keep saying this to you is, you might have an event, you might have a call for help, you might do this, submissions, whatever it is in your life for your outreach and for your humanity. Keep trying. Maybe one person shows up, maybe five people show up, maybe eventually you will build. If you are sincere, people will see you. Okay, they will work with you, the events that you want to happen, the collaborations that you dream. But I'm still saying a lot of us are at the research level, and while we're here, you know just some food for thought, right? We've had a lot of people step forward and want to be allies, or let's call them now
Yeah.
co-conspirators, conspirators. Yeah,
Co-conspirators.
co-conspirators, co-journalists. They want to come in, and we're just, and like what you're saying and what I'm saying is education first.
Yeah,
Clean up your little mental attic, do the things you have to do so you can feel like you're coming to. And the other thing too is the work will deplete you. I'm taking that back to you. Maybe you have the last uplifting thing to say about, despite the pain that you feel.
that is absolutely true. The work will deplete you. It will run you around. But that is why we stress having our systems of support and care in place. You cannot do this work alone at any stage. You cannot do this work alone. You cannot be a white cis male trying to unpack patriarchy and not talking to black and brown women. You cannot be a black woman, black cisgender woman trying to unpack homophobia and you're not talking to black and brown, queer and trans folks. So, you know, just A, being humble on the tip of knowing who you are, B, knowing what kind of fight you're going to be in for, and what, not necessarily what to expect, but just knowing that you're going to be in for a fight and you're going to need care after that. Period. You're going to need care throughout the entire thing. Finding your joy in your work. It sounds really simple, but it's more of a trick to it than you think it is. For someone who day in and day out hears about Black pain, Black trauma, yada, 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 in between all of these layers, I'm also seeing Black resilience.
Yes.
I'm also seeing, this resurgence of ancestral practices.
Yes.
I'm also seeing cycles being broken for the next generation. So there are layers of joy in between all of this trauma that you have to be discernful about, because not everything that you encounter that looks traumatic is going to be traumatic. Um, I've had personally to switch my view on this pandemic. When the pandemic first really started sweeping the nation, I was one of those people that was like, we are all gonna die. This is crazy. We're all gonna die. But I had to switch that to say, well, I'm getting to spend more time with my family than I've ever had in my life,
For better or worse.
for better or worse.
Yes.
For better or worse. But I'm getting more time to spend with my family than I have in my life,
Yes.
just finding those silver linings, because that's what's going to keep you from being depleted. Creating that space, carving out that time to take care of yourself, be
Absolutely.
that a 5-minute shower after your meetings. Actually, after I leave here, I'm about to actually go get my little water therapy on. But you have to do those things that replenish you in whatever capacity that is. Another thing that we have to stop doing if we want to sustain this work is to stop judging ourselves, stop limiting ourselves. We live in a time and place where it is impossible to survive without coping mechanisms. And in our realm of individualism and in our realm of productivity and all of these things, it's a very common thing to feel shame. It's a very common thing to judge yourself for what you do know how to do, don't know how to do, what you've experienced, so and so.
Mm.
We have to we have to forgive ourselves for a lot of shit. I mean, excuse me, for a lot of things. And we also have to realize that this is life.
Yes.
This is life. And it's probably gonna happen again.
Yes. Yes.
That queerness is, like I said, that refusal and acceptance at the same time. Refusal and
Right.
acceptance at the same time. And if you are going to do this work, you have to be able to refuse to let it bring you down while also accepting what it means to engage in it at the same time. You have to be a dual minded, dual body, dual hearted person. And in that duality, you have to have some shred of connection between the two, you know?
Yes.
And it's a whole system of checks and balances. Get your system together. However long that takes, whatever that means for you, whatever you need to shift around. Because once you start learning about yourself, once you start learning about the environment that you live in, you're going to start transforming things. Those transformative narratives are going to start hopping out at you. You're going to maybe all of a sudden not like your job so much. Maybe all of a sudden not really dig living in a HOA so much. Maybe not really dig living in this gentrified house that you just bought at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, you have to be prepared for those things, those sacrifices, but also be able to lean on your support group to mitigate through those. Yes, you did buy this gentrified house at the beginning of the pandemic, but you own it now. So now you have the option to rent it out for very low, very cheap, to reduce the housing crisis in the neighborhood. You know, there are ways for you to mitigate those violences against yourself and others. You
And
just
to
have to be
always
present to
look,
do
and
it.
to always be creative, and to I don't, like I said, I'm very loath to say
Creatively
this,
show
but
the
I'm about to
best.
say it. I'm about to say is that, you know how we pride ourselves on being strong and resilient, But then, we do judge ourselves, like you said, for falling apart or having that breakdown or that moment. And, with one of my physical situations, and it had me in the hospital, 'cause how you have an ongoing illness, right? You just do, and you
Yeah.
have to battle it, and it's not your fault, and you have great days and bad days. And I'm just going to share everything, because you know what? I know that in sharing, and Imije sharing, and all of us doing what we're doing, it's going to allow someone else to be vulnerable, even if only to themselves. But I was very upset with myself when I was ill for a while and had to recover. I was like, but I do so much. I'm trying so hard. Why? And you've got to realize that something that happens to you, maybe physically, mentally, spiritually, or emotionally, when you have those down moments, you're not being punished by a universe. Nobody says you don't matter.
Mhm.
Like, there's so many people out there who are just beating themselves up. I would love to leave you with the fact that part of your earth work is to battle those inconsistencies and injustices within yourself, because it's not perfect. We're not meant to stay here. And there is the joy in knowing that you do matter, because you wouldn't be here if you did not matter. Your story is important. There's work that you can
Mhm.
do. And there are people who have helped resistance by baking pies, like we said before, giving rides. There are people who are like, you know what? Don't discount the power of your little $10, okay? Because a lot of times I make
Yeah.
this joke, and I will say it. People are going to get the organizers like guidebook from us today. I think we should, have to have them join, a class. But this is the thing: whenever we ask to do something, and you want to help out or donate or whatever, it's always like the same 20 people giving $10. But you know what? Don't discount the power of that sphere of influence. Okay, those are where you're going to find your ride or die, because guess what? People with the most skin in the game often have the least to invest: time, money, efforts, whatever it is. So if they
Mhm.
come out with a widow's mite, please do your best to honor what they have, to also try to have, if you have an organization or an outreach, think about that financially, that maybe you can have a pay as you'd like to pay, right? Because someone might then, you'll let people in who may be economically challenged that day, but you also can have a fund to make sure that the people who need it have transportation, have a meal. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is, think creatively and out the box, because out of small things, big things grow and develop. Do not discount it. You can do something. You can save yourself. You can feel better. Um, we're Black, and that's a gift. You know what I mean? We're brown folks, and we don't go around all the time being sad and miserable. There are those days, but we are
Mhm.
very happy. I know I am. I can't speak for the world, but most of the people I know who are doing this work are happy and grateful to be alive in this time to do it, right? It's not easy, but we
Yeah.
are happy to be ourselves. We're, as you grow towards self-love, it's a process, especially if society doesn't necessarily love you. But that's the other thing. Check yourself for not tokenizing people. Do you love the culture, or do you love the people? Because if you love the culture, you might
Yeah.
not feel like you should help. Because you'll be like, well, Kanye's okay. Such and such is doing
Right.
well. You'll see,
Right.
if you love the culture, you'll tend to look at those who are less economically challenged, who are out there entertaining, doing big moves. But if you love the people,
You'll say, "Oh, I love Pose. I love that show, Pose. I love the ballroom
right,
scenes." But you also won't see the record number of Black trans women that are being harmed and
and
murdered every year.
disappearing.
That's what it means to love the culture
Right,
instead of
and
the people.
disappearing without a trace, okay? So this is because
Yeah.
justice has not come to, our community, period. But that's it.
Yeah.
I think that really kinda sums it up: is there's a struggle, but there's something that we can all do about it from wherever we are. And, like, my late father always used to say, "Take your eye off yourself and help someone else if you can." Because when you do, you'll feel a lot better. Your problems will seem a bit
Thanks.
smaller. You'll create a different space for yourself, and what, a new transformative narrative. um so I'm going to say thank you to those who have been watching. This was one of the best times I've ever had, and you are my joy, Imije. That is why I do what I do. Is for forums like this, in person and virtual, because this makes our world smaller. So thank you so much for showing up whenever you do. And do you have any closing words, Imije? Then we'll turn off our cameras.
Closing words. Um, yes. I'm an astrologist, a hobbyist, like, hobby astrologist, that's what I'm gonna call it. And we just entered our new moon system, our new moon cycle in Pisces. And the symbol or themes of Pisces are socialism, so socializing with our folks, connecting with folks, unlearning helplessness, awareness, and advocacy. So during this new we start to shift in the springtime. I don't care what that groundhog said. As we shift in the springtime, I want y'all to carry that Pisces moon energy forward in your work. Unlearn that helplessness and reach out to your people. Get to turning up that awareness. Reach out to your people. Turn up the social love. Reach out to your people. Reach out, reach out, reach out. That's all I can say is get together because we need to be united more than ever right now. More than ever. So thank y'all so much. I'm so happy
Thank
that we
you.
got to do this.
Thank
And I
you.
definitely can't wait to see what else we got cooking.
All righty. Thank you. One love, everybody. We are signing off.